This is the morning of the 12th, 18-minute clip put up by MSNBC. That's Lawrence O'Donnell. Trump says 65% of Americans are fools. Should be interesting. Let's have a listen.
Well, Donald Trump, who is facing the disapproval of 54% of Americans, continues his politically losing ways by saying something that could get that disapproval number up, something that no president in history has ever said. 2/3 of Americans are fools. Donald Trump put that in writing. Donald Trump said in writing, people that are against tariffs are fools. 65% of Americans are fools, according to Donald Trump. 65%. 65% of Americans oppose the Trump tariffs, and Donald Trump's response to that is to call them fools with an exclamation point. 65% of the country knows that Donald Trump's tariffs are causing inflation, causing them higher costs that they're facing. 65% know that the Trump tariffs are economically hurting them. And Donald Trump calls them fools and then says he wants to send them all a check for $2,000 to compensate for the economic harm that his tariffs have caused those people. The Wall Street Journal editorial board responded to that idea saying, quote, if tariffs are a free economic lunch and their benefits abound, why offer a rebate? Donald Trump is the most inconsistent, incoherent, ignorant federal elected official in history on the subject of tariffs. And because he spreads so much madness and chaos every day, the Washington news media is incapable of what would be their standard reaction to a politician saying that 65% of Americans are fools. There would be outrage. Imagine, once again, if Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton had ever said 65% of Americans are fools, imagine the number of articles that would pour forth out of the Washington news media about how elitist and out of touch that Democrat is for saying 65% of the American people are fools. Donald Trump can say it, and the Washington news media doesn't even notice it because his madness has understandably worn them down. They have lowered their standards for Donald Trump. Later in this hour, we will hear from President Obama's chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Jason Furman, on Donald Trump's idea about paying $2,000 to 225 million people he calls fools. Also, later in the hour, we'll hear from an expert on how to refund tariffs. If the Supreme Court properly rules that Donald Trump's tariffs are illegal and unconstitutional, then those illegally collected tariffs will have to be refunded. And Donald Trump is lying about such a refund now, claiming that it would involve trillions of dollars being refunded from the Treasury. That is a complete lie. Only $195 billion has been collected in Trump tariffs, and all of that could easily be refunded. The IRS refunds that much every year in overpaid income taxes. Our guest joining us later in the hour will show you exactly how tariffs are paid and exactly how they can be refunded. And it's just as easy as the refund that the Treasury sends to millions and millions of income taxpayers every year. That expert will show you an actual receipt for tariffs paid, $98,000 in tariffs paid, which includes all the information that the Treasury needs to refund that tariff money to the American payer of the Trump tariff. But we begin tonight with your feelings. There was much disappointment about the way the end of the shutdown was brokered in the United States Senate by 5 Democratic senators who appeared to change their position at the end of 7 weeks of shutdown. By the time I presented that news last night, there had been an outpouring of outrage on social media all day about Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer failing to control every Democratic vote in the Senate, something no Democratic leader of the Senate has ever been able to consistently do. The late-night comedians had their usual fun at Chuck Schumer's expense. Some of them clearly think that they would be better at the job of Democratic leader of the United States Senate because obviously it's easy in their view. When I explained what I think is the reality of Senate leadership here last night, based on my experience working in the Senate, I wasn't so much concerned with the feelings of the disappointed than I was with the reality of the situation and getting that reality as clear as possible here. But our first guest tonight is much better at addressing feelings than I am, as he showed in this video posted yesterday.
I know that a lot of people are feeling some pretty strong feelings today, feelings of frustration, even betrayal. I have somewhat the advantage of, from being in the Senate, being a couple of days ahead of everybody, seeing that this was going to happen. So I've had a bit more time to process it than people who discovered it yesterday. And while I think everybody is entitled to their feelings on this, and I don't want to derogate those in any way, we need to remember the battle that we're in. And every ounce of energy that we put into fighting with each other, fighting with other Democrats, is energy that is lost to the fight to defend our country from Trump and MAGA. Whatever your feelings are, I validate them. Great, feel that way. But we've got a battle on our hands. And it's a battle whose real game day is November a year from now, when we have the chance to throw Speaker Johnson out of the Speaker's office and put the Senate under Democratic control and put real obstacles in the way of Trump's corruption and misconduct.
What happens if...
That's assuming Trump's going to be here by then, which I don't think he will be. Let's go back.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is one of the people who one of our faithful viewers suggested on Twitter last night should be the new Senate Democratic leader. I'll ask Senator Whitehouse if he thinks Chuck Schumer should be replaced as leader and if he wants that job. It's worth noting that no Democratic member of the Senate has said their leader should be replaced. And we now have reporting indicating that the small group of Democratic senators who reached a compromise with Republicans started working on that compromise on the first night of the government shutdown 7 weeks ago. Politico reports Senators Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire and Angus King of Maine began talking with Republicans the first night of the shutdown by Shaheen's account. So, with a small group of Democrats working with Republicans from the first night of the shutdown, Chuck Schumer was able to convince those Democrats not to make a deal until after last week's election. Donald Trump himself blamed the shutdown for the Republicans' wipeout in last week's election. And if that's true, does Chuck Schumer deserve some credit for pushing the shutdown through last week's election so it could have that impact on the election? The final Democratic vote that sealed the deal came from Tim Kaine of Virginia, who was Hillary Clinton's vice presidential running mate. There appears to be a belief out there that the minority leader of the Senate can simply tell Tim Kaine what to do. Tim Kaine said that his number one issue in the shutdown was always protecting federal government workers. And he achieved some protection for government workers, many of whom live in his state of Virginia, in his negotiations with Republicans. Politico reports Tim Kaine privately laid out weeks ago what he needed in return for his vote to end the government shutdown: a moratorium on mischief. He meant no more firing of federal workers. So there's the final vote that sealed the deal, that got them to 60. The final vote sealed the deal, negotiating with Republicans for weeks, negotiating with Republicans weeks before last week's election. And through it all, Chuck Schumer tried to hold on to those Democrats. And our leader.
You know, it's really too bad that Lawrence O'Donnell doesn't run for president, but I think he's 74 years old. He might be a little bit too old, but he sure looks presidential, and he sure talks presidential. And unlike this moron we have playing president, he understands what needs to be done. I'll attach the link. There's more for you to listen to, but I'm afraid it might not upload, so I don't want to take the chance. Pass it along, and thanks for listening.